Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome back to Final Trade. We're going to have a follow-up whiteboard video today to yesterday's video, which you can click this button right here to see. And it's going to do with a couple questions that I got from people about network value theory of TCG investing, other ideas. And then at the end, we're going to talk about a new speculative theory that I'm trying to kind of coalesce in my mind. I want to run that by y'all and get some feedback and just some ideas that I can think about for a while. So first off, Chris Tuckwell asks, is it worth making any differentiation for casual players versus tournament players? And yeah, that would come down to the quality of players overall. And so what you might do is cut this kind of big aggregate player node into several nodes, and they would be different quality players. WotC has said before that they get about $100 per year off of the average Magic player, something like that, which, is weird. You have to imagine that for all the weirdos like us who spend thousands of dollars putting boxes back in their closets, that there are all kinds of people who walk in and do they play like one booster draft per year, or they just sit down with an existing commander deck and play? And so you could divide this kind of player supernode up into all kinds of different differentiations. And of course, professional players, competitive players would be amongst that. Or you could handle it a second way. It could be some kind of attribute of your manufacturer node. And in the way that, we look at LSS managing Flesh and Blood and how good of a job they do with competitive play, with supporting card stores for local events, with having regional events and up to world level events, keeping the meta fresh all the time, worrying a lot about how to do that, keep it balanced, keep it interesting, keep it fun, and supporting that professional play. Because ultimately, there are a lot of people who have professional play as an aspiration. And maybe to a lot of the viewers of this channel, that seems kind of weird because my viewers kind of like skew older, 35 to 45-year-old on average is my viewer base here. But there are a lot of younger players who think, yeah, it would be cool to be a professional player, a professional Magic player, professional Fab player, whatever. And so it's important that the manufacturers support that. And I kind of suspect that Chris here may be asking a loaded question. He says, does the lack of tournaments make a positive or negative impact upon a game's network? Well, we can look at Flesh and Blood and the great job that LSS does supporting organized play, professional play. And we can compare that to Wizards of the Coast basically dismantling the pro circuit play a couple years ago and just having a terrible history of failing to properly support card stores with prize support, with everything they would need to have more in-store play in a more organized manner. We can also look at Pokemon. Pokemon does a pretty bad job, and you can argue that they have some reasons for the things they do, but ultimately they've been fairly hostile against organized play in stores and out of stores in the recent past. So overall, having good organized play supported by the manufacturer will make the network more valuable because there are those people who aspire to be professional card players. Now, most of them never succeed in that, but it's an aspiration. It gives them more interest in staying involved in the game, buying more product, being exciting. Some people just enjoy watching the professionals play. And I guess there probably is a small number of people who enjoy watching the professionals play and don't even play themselves. I mean, I do that with esports. So good question. And it would be something if we wanted to take this model and make it more refined. And we could break up these groups a little more and define more attributes of each one. If there was a way to actually quantify the network value for a TCG, that is something we would do. We would start chopping this up into higher and higher fidelity bits in order to model them more accurately. And second, Dan the Man asks, very interesting, great look at enabling long-term healthy market. He says the barrier for entry in the short term is much lower than the barrier to create long-term sustainability. So that's the first part. And yes, I will say it has never been easier to get your shitty game published than it is today. And I get an issue of Game Trade magazine every month that comes in the mail for me. And it's kind of this, janky industry magazine for the games industry. And so it covers TCGs, but it also covers board games and tabletop RPGs and wargaming and, all that kind of stuff taken together. And yeah, it is every month, it's full of brand new crappy games that are going to fail, mostly board games, because getting cheap artwork produced for your game has never been easier. It's never been cheaper. Getting a game printed, getting it into a distribution system, and getting it into some stores has never been easier. And yet, designing good games arguably becomes a tiny bit harder every year because the good games that have already been designed get refined a little more and the bar gets raised a little bit higher. And most board games, when you walk into a game store, most of them are utter garbage. They're not worth playing. If you have to suffer through them once, you won't want to suffer through them again. And that's just the reality. Most of them suck because game design is really, really hard. And so establishing a tiny network by designing your new game and pushing it out into the market is really easy. But growing it and sustaining it long term and making it amongst the largest networks in the world in the history of TCGs, say, that's very, very hard. And so the barrier of entry to get started is incredibly low, but succeeding is really hard. And Dan goes on, he says, if you love your new TCG, get out there and grow your network. And yeah, I mean, if you think that sorcery is the thing, that sorcery is going to one day displace Magic, and you think somehow WotC's just going to burn Magic to the ground and not stop until everything is a charred husk and it's all ashes and sorcery will take its place, you probably need to be out there supporting the sorcery network. You need to be doing things like recruiting people to play, spreading it amongst your friends, teaching them how to play, starting a YouTube channel, posting play videos, posting strategy, trying to affect the metagame, trying to solve the metagame, doing all those things that help strengthen the network. Because if you're a long-term believer in this part, then you need all the rest of these parts to be healthy so that one day you can extract money out of this. And so just sitting by and thinking, well, I'm just going to buy so many boxes of every MetaZoo product and just pray that one day it'll be worth a bunch of money and you'll somehow be able to extract that from the network when barely anyone actually plays MetaZoo, that's not going to work out. Or rather, the odds of it working out are rather low. So if you want your TCG to succeed, that you want to invest in, then you've got to be out there trying to grow the rest of the network. And that's another reason why I like Magic and Pokemon before anything else. The networks are huge. Like, I seriously could not do anything in my life to grow the network in any significant way because the networks are so large already. And so it doesn't rely on me, where we can arguably say that in the early days of Flesh and Blood, Rudy single-handedly did a lot to help Flesh and Blood get publicity, be spread into more stores, be exposed to more players, more investors, to get collectors interested, and everything like that. Rudy demonstrably moved the needle on Flesh and Blood's market size in the early days. But if you're sitting there right now with a bunch of One Piece boxes, a bunch of Final Fantasy, or a bunch of Weiss boxes, you need to be out there trying to grow that network to try to make sure they're worth something in the future and that there will be buyers for them. I'm skeptical, but good luck. Okay, so now I want to get into this speculative theory that I hinted at the beginning. And, there's a lot of people out there who are in what we might call the traditional collectible investing world. And let's just say it's things like stamps and coins and old video game consoles and toys and things like that. Okay. And they'll look from their area of expertise towards the TCG investing world. And they'll say things like, it was never meant to be that way. Or there's no organic collectability, so there's no money to be made. And, you kind of look around and you say, but, I bought a bunch of Pokemon boxes in late 2021 and they're all up 50 to 80%. I mean, I could sell them right now, pay all the fees, pay shipping, and I would be way ahead. And you look around, you say, I bought all these tins and collections and V-boxes and things 15 months ago, and they're up over 100%. And so there's this incongruence between people saying, well, it's never meant to be that way. There's no organic collectability and there's no money to be made in the TCG investment world, and the data that show that, yes, there's tons of money to be made. In fact, you can just go make the money. And so I've always wondered, like, why do people so confidently claim that? And as I was thinking about this network value theory a lot, I started to imagine, what does network value look like to people from the traditional collectible world and the traditional collectible investment hobby world? So let's draw that and think about it. And a lot of this is really speculative. I haven't thought through all of this theory completely yet, so I would appreciate a lot of feedback from you guys if you have ideas about this. But let's say you're into coin collecting, okay? So we're going to put up here the US Mint as the primary manufacturer. Yeah. And, we have other manufacturers who stamp their own coins, and, they make like collectible rounds and things like that. I'll throw in, let's do APMEX, the American Precious Metals Exchange. I think they stamp some coins and rounds and things. And I don't know, there's other companies out there that do it. And there's foreign mints. I mean, you can get online, you can buy a bunch of Canadian and Australian coins from their mints, European coins, other things. So let's say we have these other, mints as part of their network. And then, you've got coin shops. There's even a coin shop just a few miles from here. I mean, they still exist. So you got coin shops, and then you've got collectors. All right. And, that's the bulk of your individuals who do it because they love coins and stuff like that. Now, if you are in this world, how do you think about this network? What do you know about this network? Well, one, there's no players because they're old collectible coins. You can't play with them, right? There's really no investors. There are no people who are sitting around saying, well, I think this particular wheat penny is about to, undergo a huge spike in price from $4 to $9, and they're speculating in old coins. I mean, there's probably a couple people who try to do that, but by and large, it's not a big thing. It doesn't move the needle. The shops are basically just trying to make a cut on every sale. It's not like they're hosting events and they're, doing pre-orders of new releases and things. In fact, most of this distribution system, the distribution is rolled up into the manufacturers. A lot of them sell directly to the consumers and to the shops. And so, it's cuts out the distribution layer. It's a much different network. And so the amount of money sloshing around, one, it's much smaller because things like coin collecting, stamp collecting, frankly, I don't know anybody above ground who's under the age of about 70 who collects coins. It's just kind of a dying thing, like classic cars. Classic car values are falling too because the people who love them are getting old and dying, and younger people these days don't care about classic cars the same way they don't really care about stamps or coins or these older collectibles. So you can't play with them. You don't really speculate on them. The network is not as big. There are fewer connections. So if there's inefficiency, there are fewer routes to route around that inefficiency in the network. And the places where money goes, well, money goes out of the network from the manufacturers, it goes out from the shops, and it comes in from the collectors. And, once in a while, a collector may decide to sell his collection, but because he's collecting, he's often not trying to get money out. And so when you look at this kind of network, it looks a lot different than this network. In fact, they're completely different beasts in how they operate, in the demographics that are involved, the amount of money that's sloshing around, the number of connections, the ways that we might rate those connections, the long-term potential market for these things is much different. And so it starts to become a little more understandable that people who invest in things like old coins, old stamps, old books, video game consoles, toys, things like that, and their networks look like this, they come over into a world where the network looks like this, and there's way more money sloshing around. The products are much different. You actually have players who are constantly injecting new money into the system, and they can't understand it. And I suspect that if I kind of stick with this theory and you guys help me develop it a little bit, it'll go a long way towards being a satisfying theory of explaining why the people who sit around saying it was never meant to be this way and there's no organic collectability and all those things, why they're so consistently wrong. Because we know the data. I mean, I present the data here all the time. You know, we go back and we look at the last 15 years of performance of Pokemon sets, of even Magic standard sets, and we see the kind of long-term appreciation of the assets. And then we're told it's not meant to be this way and it can't go on. And we know there's something incongruent there. There's something wrong. And I suspect that this network value is a way of reconciling that and explaining why those people's view on the world is so different because of the area that they're interested in, the kind of hobbies they're interested in compared to this world. I think that's the theory. Now, I need help developing the theory some more. So, you know, if you have supporting or contradicting evidence or other ideas or anything you could add, let me know, because I'm going to be thinking about this a lot going forward. I'll probably come back in a couple of months and I'll make a video completely about this, but I suspect that this is a way to explain why those people are so consistently wrong. Let me know what you think. So thanks to the guys who commented, asked these great follow-up questions. Thanks for sitting around to the end of my new speculative theory and at least entertaining it. Let me know what you think, guys. Thanks to everyone who makes this content possible, especially my very generous supporters on Patreon who bought this whiteboard. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, and join me on Final Trade.